Hey, my friends, just finished an hour-long conversation with Shabbos Kestenbaum. Boy, does that man speak fast. And he is bright and on top of all the issues. We spoke a lot, of course, about Iran. Is there anyone who is opposing what Israel is doing? Of course, there are plenty of people opposing. What are the colleges saying? Is it making it more difficult for Jewish students on college campus? We spoke about his lawsuit against Harvard, which was just settled. Some people are saying we should no longer be sending our kids to these. I asked Shabbos straight out, would you send your child to Harvard, your unborn children to Harvard? By the way, he's single and very eligible bachelor. And do you think that these campuses can change? Can they change their ways? Can they reform with the new policies from the government, from the United States, from the Trump administration, and with his lawsuit, which was aimed at forcing Harvard University to protect its Jewish students? Interestingly, he is a registered Democrat, even though he's come out in favor of Trump. And we spoke a little about whether or not Israel as a state, as a Jewish state, will have the support of both Republicans and Democrats. It seems like things have been shifting to the Republican Party over the last 20 years. I remember growing up, the biggest supporters of Israel were Democrats, not Republicans. Yes, there's an isolationist view within the Republican Party that doesn't want Trump to send the bombers and the bunker busters that Israel needs in order to get all of the nuclear warheads that Iran has been developing. We spoke about that for a while. And who are some of the Jewish people and Israel's greatest allies in the world? We know about the Christians, and we know about the evangelical Christians. But did you know that the Hindus are very into Israel also? And there's some other groups that nobody's talking about that is important for us to know. We are not nearly as despised or hated in the world as we think. We've got plenty of adversaries out there, no question, and a lot of people on the very, very hard left that are taking, unfortunately, the wrong position on Israel. And we discussed that at length. Very important. How many of today's 18 to 26-year-olds that have been indoctrinated on college campus, can we bring them back? Or do we just have to say, no, they've just been indoctrinated in this oppressor versus oppressed binary paradigm. Israel is an oppressor, and therefore, I can never support them. Or, no, just like they were indoctrinated one way, we can convince them another way. This is a very, very important conversation to have. And what is the future? Should we be pouring all of the money that we're pouring into combating anti-Semitism? Because let's face it, it hasn't really worked. All of the ADLs and all the other well-intentioned organizations that are trying to fight Jewish hate, has it really helped? Should we take some of that money, at least some of that money, and put it into positive Jewish outreach and education, and send more Jews to Israel, and make more Jews inspired? You can't make anything, but we can inspire Jews to be more committed to their Jewish traditions. That's ultimately, listen, you know what I feel about this, running MGE, but where are the resources going? And do we need to continue to pump more and more money into combating anti-Semitism when, unfortunately, it doesn't seem to have made that much of a difference? This and many other issues. I had the great honor of speaking with Shabbos Kestenbaum. He is on the rise. He's an amazing, amazing guy. Did I mention he was single? Welcome, Shabbos Kestenbaum. What an honor and pleasure to have you with us. Welcome to the Wildes Cast, MGE's podcast. First of all, let's start. How'd you get your great name, Shabbos? I mean, I'm a rabbi, and they called me Mark, so go figure.
Yeah, I was born on Shabbos, so my parents kind of figured, why not?
Straightforward. I love it. That's good. Well, you're unmistakably Jewish, I guess. I don't know if that's what you were going for, So a more pressing issue, we woke up this morning. I woke up this morning. I got two boys in Israel and a lot of friends in Tel Aviv with a new MGE site over there. And we woke up to the news of significant damage to central towns in Israel. You've been stating for a long time that Iran should not have a nuclear weapon. Do you think there's any confusion, or there's some debate that there are some people in the world or who you've been in contact with that think otherwise, that this is something that can be tolerated or should be tolerated, that Israel attacking is just not justified?
Sure. I mean, certainly we have the usual cast of characters, whether it is the far left on college campuses or in the streets of New York. And then you also have the far right isolationists. Unfortunately, some of them are in the United States Congress, individuals like Thomas Massey of Kentucky, also Rand Paul of Kentucky. Look, I was at the White House yesterday, and I won't say which individuals I was speaking to, but I was speaking to certain individuals who work within foreign policy, work within counterterrorism operations, and within Trump's immediate orbit. I don't think there is that confusion. I think there is a clear-eyed precision whereby President Trump has been consistent for more than a decade that Iran should not and cannot have a nuclear weapon. You can go back to speeches he made even before he ran for president in 2016, talking about that one of the greatest threats the world faces is in fact a nuclear Iran. So as it pertains to policy, I don't think there's much confusion. I do think we're going to see strong action from the White House in the coming days ahead. That's not me speaking as a spokesman for the White House. That's just my personal opinion.
Yeah.
But as I said, unfortunately, as a society and within American culture, we are seeing in tandem with moral decadence and degradation, we are seeing the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps and the Islamic regime of Iran being held up as the new face of the resistance, right? This is a regime that is anti-West, that is anti-American in a positive sense. And I fear for a society whereby they look at a country that will imprison and oftentimes kill unmarried girls for showing their hair, and then saying that is a regime, that is a country that we want to support and we want to march for in the streets.
You see, that's for some reason I kind of got used to Hamas, Hezbollah being supported, but not the Khomeini in Iran. And you're saying that now the Iranians are being held up by, I guess, the people on the far left.
Yeah, I mean, again, this isn't, my take. It's unfortunately what we're seeing objectively. I mean, just last night in Times Square, there was a massive rally. Again, not necessarily against Israel, but way more explicitly in support of the Islamic Republic of Iran, waving the Islamic Republic of Iran flags, chanting glory to the martyrs.
And not for the people, not for the people of Iran, for the government, you're saying.
Exactly, not for the people at all. And this also is true of Gaza. This is true of Yemen. This is true of Lebanon. If you truly care about the people of those places, then you would laud and praise the Israel Defense Forces who are liberating the peoples from those countries each and every day. But we've seen, and again, it's most pertinent on our campuses, but we have seen that these actors are not interested in the people. They're not interested in the freedom and the liberation that Israel has brought about since October 7th. What they are truly interested in, as they will tell you to your face, is the freeing of Palestine from the river to the sea, is the dissolution of the state of Israel. And that's why I have former classmates from Harvard who went to their social medias just last night to praise the attack on Soroka Hospital. Soroka, of course, I've been there. The foreign minister took us to Soroka Hospital, where we saw with our own eyes the Muslims, the Christians, the Druze, and the Jews who work side by side. I mean, Soroka is a model of coexistence.
It's I was there not so long ago, and Arabs everywhere, Jews working together. But it just boggles my mind. I mean, now that they see, I mean, does it matter that they're seeing the Ayatollah, that the government of Iran is actually targeting population centers in Israel, in Tel Aviv? Does that move anyone? Does that serve as some kind of evidence of who we're dealing with here?
Not really, because when you're fed a diet of political indoctrination for years and years, you sort of become numb to it. What do I mean by that? And again, I don't want to focus too much on Harvard, but it happens to be a good example of this. When you are taught in the classroom every day since October 7th that Israel is indiscriminately targeting nursing homes and school buses and hospitals, and you genuinely believe that to be the case because that's what your professors are telling you, that's what your classmates are singing and chanting in the campus, then when Israel is targeted in a similar fashion, well, it's sort of justified. As my classmates will tell you, resistance is justified when people are occupied. So that common human experience we would have whereby we are shocked to see the deliberate targeting of hospitals, you don't really have that common human experience anymore because so many young people have been indoctrinated to believe that Israel had been doing this for 2 years anyway.
Right.
We were
They
the
have it. They
first.
have. So we have it coming. We have it
Exactly.
like October 7th. We had this coming now. It's from the Iranians. Before it was from their proxy.
Exactly. Look, we were the first university in the world because of Chabad to display that 47-minute Hamas, propaganda footage.
Yeah.
Because Hamas, of course, recorded their atrocities on October 7th with GoPros, and I would say about, I don't know, four, maybe 500 people came to actually watch the footage. Of the 400 to 500, almost all of them were Jews, were people like me who really didn't need to see it. Interesting tidbit, the president of the university at the time, Claudine Gay, she did not watch the footage because she had to prepare for her congressional testimony the next day, which of course went incredibly well. Even though, by the way, Bill Ackman offered to fly her on a private jet to DC so she could get there in time. But I digress. Why is it that A, so many people did not see the footage, and B, of the people who did see, it was Jews? It's because, again, as my classmates will tell you, as they've told me, resistance is justified when people are occupied. So whether it was 4 babies or 40,000 babies who were beheaded on October 7th, it really doesn't matter because resistance is justified when people are occupied. And we see this in another sense with Luigi Mangione. He was the Penn graduate who shot and killed Brian Thompson, the CEO of United Healthcare, in broad daylight. This was an assassination, and broad swaths of the American people denounce it as an assassination, with one noted exception, and that is Americans between the ages of 18 and 26, who by and large actually support what Luigi Mangione did, killing this, father of four. Why? Because it all falls through this diversity, equity, inclusion rubric, whereby if you are the victim of this untangible, undefined oppression, if you are on the victimhood Olympics, then you can literally at carte blanche do whatever it is you see fit to rid yourself of this oppression, rid yourself of this injustice. And whether that means raping Jewish women, whether it means killing a father of four, it doesn't matter, because as a victim, you have the right to rid yourself of that injustice.
So you very much believe that the victimhood Olympics, as you call it, is really ideologically responsible for 18 to 26-year-olds. The indoctrination, I mean, that's where it's coming from. It's not anti-Semitism per se. Let's say I'm not talking about maybe everyone or some of the professors, perhaps, or the administration, but let's say students, an 18 to 26-year-old. I mean, MJ, we reach out to 20s and 30s. This is my population. I want to know what I'm dealing with here. They're coming out of college, graduate school, and you're saying that they're so anti-Israel, not because they're anti-Jewish, because they hate Jews, they're anti-Semites, but because because of the victimhood issue. Is that it?
That's exactly it. Look, Israel is a perfect amalgamation of greater societal ills. Israel is the manifestation of decades and decades of this political indoctrination, where the state of Israel is seen as a white oppressive nation, and thereby any act of resistance, whether it is Hamas, whether it's the Houthis, whether it's Hezbollah, whether it's Iran, whatever it happens to be, all acts are by definition justified. Again, this is not my take. This is not a right-wing talking point. You will hear this from the campus activists themselves. You can read the signs that they carry. Resistance is justified when people are occupied. Globalize the Intifada. Glory to the martyrs. Free Palestine from the river to the sea. Why? Because universities have created this binary ideology where all peoples can be classified into two systems, the oppressor or the oppressed. And Jews, certainly American Jews at least, have the misfortune of being mischaracterized as white. And because of that white oppressive status, any act of resistance is justified. And that's why organizations like MJE are more important now more than ever, because it's taking young, impressionable individuals at a very vulnerable part of their lives. And they're not only trying to dispel the lies, but they're also trying to, I don't want to say add light, because that sounds quite superficial, but it happens to be true. They add an alternative mode of thinking, that a society whereby we can champion a young man killing a father of four is not a healthy society, right? That is not good for the collective nature of our country. And I posted on Twitter just yesterday in response to Rabbi David Beshefkin, who had spoken about this new idea, which I certainly support, of tackling the yeshiva tuition crisis by essentially tying it to the stock market, and based on your gains, you would automatically use 50% of your profits, bring down tuition costs, which, it's interesting. It's not going to happen, but it's a good idea. And anyways, I responded by saying, if you truly want to combat anti-Semitism, then we as a people, as the American Jewish community, would invest almost all of our resources immediately, I mean, overnight, into making sure there's not a single American Jew today who's going to public school because their parents can't afford Jewish day school. You would double the enrollment of Jewish summer camps. You would make sure every birthright bus is fully staffed. You would make sure there's not a single American Jew who doesn't know where their nearest, Chabad house or synagogue or MJ is. That is how you combat anti-Semitism. And I was just elected to the World Zionist Congress through the Esha Am slate. And, you have my word, I will not fund any program if it has the words combating anti-Semitism in it. It is, forget about it, it's a waste of time and it's a waste of resources. It is. We know that.
Do you think, I'm just going to cut you off. First of all, this is fascinating because who's the gentleman that just gave this speech at the 92nd Street Y? He's got a big podcast. Help me.
Dan Senor.
Dan Senor. I mean, I've been saying this. MJ's 26 years old. I've been saying, put your money into Jewish outreach and education, because already when I started MJ in August of 98, I mean, the amount of money that the Jewish community continued then and continues now to pour into combating anti-Semitism, what do we have to show for it? I can tell you what we have to show for it on the outreach educational front. Okay, because and it's brilliant. And Dan Senor was calling everybody, wrote up Startup Nation. We're now getting it from outside the Orthodox world, which is amazing. Amazing. So I have two questions for you. Number one, are we giving up on the current 18, 26-year-olds? Are you suggesting there's nothing we can do about them? They're too indoctrinated in this oppressor versus oppressed, binary paradigm, and they're gone. There's nothing we can do. We can't bring them back. And therefore, we just have to focus on the next generation, make sure we don't lose the next ones to Harvard, Yale, and Princeton. And then number two, what about Harvard, Yale, and Princeton? Do we continue to send our kids there if this indoctrination, prevails?
Sure. So I think there are two ways of answering the question. One is internally and one is externally. Internally, we as a community should recognize the following. There is a reason we have outlasted the Persians and the Byzantines and the Romans and the Greeks and the Egyptians. We've been around for 3,000 years. We will be around for the next 3,000 years. We will continue to be titans of industry. We will continue to be creative and innovative and resourceful because that's who we are and that's what we do. The Jewish American community does not need Harvard. We just don't. Harvard, on the other hand, very much needs Jews. They very much need Jews. And if they want to insist on accepting a radical, loud minority of students who burn American flags, who call for the globalization of the Intifada and the eradication of Western civilization, who disrupt classrooms, then go for it. But we're so much better than you. And I don't just mean the Jewish community, the American people as well. The American people are sick and tired, not just of the political indoctrination, but of the stupidity, the culture of stupidity, the glorification of stupidity that they're seeing on their campuses, which is why Harvard, for example, has had a 17% drop in early applications, a 5% drop in applications overall, hundreds of millions of dollars in donations being withheld. They're on the cold open of Saturday Night Live. They will have their endowments being taxed from 1.4 to 21%. That's the provision of the big, beautiful bill, which hopefully we'll see passed before July 4th.
1.4 to what? What was that?
1.4 to 21%. 21% is the corporate tax rate. So Harvard and Columbia and Penn and all these major institutions, they pay less as a percentage in taxes than you and I do. So I digress. So it's not that we're abandoning these institutions. These institutions have abandoned us. They've abandoned the Jewish community, and they certainly abandoned the American people. I mean, that's what I said at my speech at the Republican convention.
But would you not send your kids, please God, one day to Harvard then, if they got in?
So I'm always careful not to tell people where they should or shouldn't go, with the exception of Columbia University, because I think Columbia is just an incubator of stupidity. And
I'm a graduate. So
nobody's perfect. And and
by the way, I just want you to know, I'm much older than you. Edward Said was at Columbia when I was there. Okay.
Oh, wow.
And I don't remember there being this oppressor versus oppressed, this victim Olympics at all at the time, that whole ideology. But I do remember, him being incredibly popular already. I graduated in 93, okay? And I studied in the Middle East Institute as well, so I got a big hit of it. And but this is going on a long time.
Yeah.
And I want to strengthen the question I'm asking you about your, please God, future unborn children. Okay. If 1993, and it's now 2025, it just got worse and worse and worse. with all of this Jewish activity at Columbia. When I went to Columbia, I was part of I davened mincha in the middle of the day, 180 people at mincha in the middle of the day in the early 90s. Okay, I started a one-on-one learning program there. We started a beginner's minyan. We was part of the Chabad, and now, so like, what argument can we make to continue? And you just said something fascinating. You said we don't really need Harvard. Harvard needs us. So if we don't need them and they are anti-Semitic, I mean, how can we even justify paying tuition to an institution unless you don't believe fundamentally, systematically that they are anti-Semitic? They can be changed. They're open to change. What's your feeling about that?
Well, again, I'd say two things. Number one, I'm not saying we abandon those spaces because of anti-Semitism. We abandon those spaces because they've abandoned us. I'll give you one quick example. Whether you hate Donald Trump or love Donald Trump, the day after Donald Trump was reelected as president, certain Harvard professors canceled classes. They baked lemon squares for their students. They hired Sunshine the Puppet to console students. There was story time with Marty. There was basket weaving, and there were free massages. I mean, you want to normalize that type of institution and that type of culture. I cannot tell you the amount of hedge fund managers and billionaires and CEOs, including one I just spoke to yesterday, who've told me to my face, Shabbos, we do not want to hire individuals from Columbia, from Harvard, from Penn. And I think that's a really good thing. Harvard does not have a monopoly on intelligence. They do not have a monopoly on good paying jobs. They don't have a monopoly on the national conversation. And I speak across the country, really across the world. I spoke in Amsterdam last month, which was cool.
That's
And I hear so often, no, we need to send our kids to these places now more than ever to fight back, which is such a ludicrous response for a couple of reasons. Number one, if you truly believe that it is your child's destiny to spend 4 years, important 4 years of their life, where they're forming their ideas, they're establishing relationships, they're figuring out who it is that they are, that it is important for them to spend those 4 years, yelling at Fox News about their roommate who just drew another swastika. If you truly believe that that's their calling, then pack up right now and move to Dearborn, Michigan, because there are a lot of anti-Semites there. But oddly enough, I have yet to hear a Jewish mom on the Upper East Side telling me we have to move to Dearborn, Michigan. If you truly believe that you need to send
but let me push back for a minute. Devil's advocate here. If somebody were listening to you giving this talk and they said, "But what we're going to abandon the
Right,
intellectuals, the next politicians, we're all coming out of Harvard and Yale. So if we give up that." If we, that's like saying, "Oh, let's just support the Republicans, and Israel will cease to be a bipartisan."
Well,
that's not healthy.
Well, no, that's not a fair analogy, because in the American political process, there are literally two parties. There are the Democrats and the Republicans.
Okay.
I should know because I'm still a registered Democrat. In fact,
yeah, I'm going to get to that.
I have my absentee ballot for New York City mayor's race right here.
Yeah.
So I don't believe we should abandon the Democratic Party because there are only two options. You know how many universities there are in this country? 6,000.
Right. But how many of them? But how many of them are producing the next generation's leaders?
So this brings me to the most important point, which is this. I don't want to age you, although you did tell me when you graduated, so I could figure it out. It is true that in the past, these institutions have produced the next generation of American thought leaders, of policymakers, of judges, of authors of the books your kids and grandkids will read. That is certainly true of the past. I am telling you as fact that is not true of the future. Employers, people of prominence, they are significantly less concerned about where you went to college and significantly more concerned about the values you believe in. And I'll use myself as a good example, not to sound arrogant or braggadocious, God forbid, but I was offered in the last year jobs of which I have zero qualifications for, zero, with a very, very generous starting salary with very generous benefits. Why? It's not because I'm good at that job. It's not because I have experience. It is literally because the CEO would call me and say, we believe in the values you're fighting for, and we want someone like that on our team. And it is, as I said, in the age of social media in the 21st century, employers are far less concerned and far less impressed about Columbia, Harvard, Penn, and they're way more concerned about who are you as an individual. That is the future of higher education.
And you think that's across the board, and that's really catching on? That's the future?
100%. I spoke at a hedge fund. I won't mention the name, but I spoke at a hedge fund last month, and I spoke in front of 200, finance bros with their quarter zip tees and all that. And I don't know what percentage were Jewish. I can't imagine it was that many. But I told them, look, forget about anti-Semitism. You do not want my classmates who are incapable of thinking critically about issues, who are incapable of recognizing there are ideologies that contend and disagree with theirs. You don't want them working for you. You don't want them sharing office spaces with you. You don't want them as employees or employers. And I think Google happens to be a good example of this because there were, I think this was in San Francisco, although I could be wrong on this, but there were a group of newly minted campus activists who had graduated, taken jobs at Google, and during the height of the Harvard Hamas homeless shelter, which is the encampments, they tried building their
Harvard Hamas
yeah.
homeless shelter. I love it. Okay.
That's trademarked. Ben Shapiro used that on his show, so I've trademarked it. But during the height of the Tentifadas, they decided they were going to pitch tents in Google's office, and they weren't going to leave unless Google divests from genocide or whatever it was. And Google's response was they called the cops, arrested them, and fired them the next day. Done. There is only one place in the United States of America where this behavior and this stupidity is tolerated, and that's college campuses. There's no other institution. There's no other environment you can point to whereby
Listen,
the
you don't
radicals
have
get the
to.
microphone.
So your answer would be if somebody came to you, and I know you're not going to tell anyone, and I don't tell people either. I've always been advocating. I'm a rabbi, so I want people when they come back from their gap year, or even if they didn't go to yeshiva in Israel for a year, I want them to spend those 4 years of intellectual exploration around Torah personalities, around individuals that will grow them in a positive, healthy sense. So I've always been advocating. Now, I have friends who went to Columbia when I did, and they did very, very well religiously, Jewishly, but not everybody does. So I've been advocating this before all the anti-Semitism, started unraveling over there. But at the end of the day, Shabbos, would you, if your son came to you and said, Dad, Abba, I got in. This is good for me. I'll be okay there. I'll even fight back. Would you write a check to Harvard? He didn't get a scholarship. Okay, you have to pay them.
First of all,
I'm
he's not
sorry,
going to call.
I'm pressing you because this is a major issue, and to
Okay,
me, no one is saying I'm not. There are donors not giving money anymore, and there
good.
are some people not sending their kids. But I don't see a real change in the Jewish community. There's
Correct.
still
There won't be a real change in the Jewish community. I've spoken to, at this point, at least, I don't know, 10,000 American Jews in the last year, probably a bit more, but at least I know for a fact I haven't changed anyone's minds. Jews are still going to send their kids to Harvard and Columbia because they can't get out of their own way. I recognize that what I say is meaningless. No one listens. Okay. I say it for myself because it's important for me to put on paper what I believe in.
yeah,
I'll
but
say this.
but
So let me
go ahead, go
answer. I'll
ahead.
say this. I'll talk about the particular and not the universal. As an Orthodox community, we invest a significant amount of time, resources, and money in education. We recognize that a love of Torah, a love of Israel, a love of Judaism is a paramount concern. I grew up with the stories of people who were Mesiras Nefesh, who sacrificed quite literally their life and limb in order to keep Shabbat, in order to go to the mikveh, in order to XYZ. And to me, it is the most bizarre, most self-defeating, most inappropriate allocation of that resources, of those monies, of those times, to then say at the age of 18 and 19, okay, we've just invested X amount of dollars. We now want to send you deliberately to an institution where all of those things that for 18 years we taught you were fundamental to who you are, all of those things on day one will be scorned, humiliated, denigrated, and challenged at best. We want you to go to an institution where those things will be scorned, and at worst, you're not even wanted. It's such a bizarre proposition to me that you would deliberately put your kids into an environment where everything you believe in, everything, will be challenged and made fun of. To me, it does not make sense. And I'll make one other point. What is far more important than where you went to college is the belief system, is the value system you have. And as I said, Harvard does not have a monopoly on good paying jobs, on intelligence, on all that stuff. It is far more important for a Jewish person today to be connected with the land of Israel, to be as knowledgeable as possible about Jewish history, Jewish culture, Judaism, and far less important about the colleges they went to. It just does not matter. I'm
Right.
telling you this. And
No,
for
I'm
the life
telling you,
of me,
listen,
what
you and I are a generation. I grew up in a generation where this was like the Holy Grail. You got into Harvard, it's like it's asking parents of my generation. I'm 57. It's asking parents of my generation who are sending their kids to college. It's like We have to get that out of our heads. College is not what it used to be.
Yeah, and if I could also just add, because I think you're alluding to this, the idea that we're going to lose a seat at the table. The table
Right.
is not at Columbia anymore. That's what I'm trying to tell parents and grandparents. The table isn't there. If you want your kid to have a seat at the table's at the University of Austin. It's at Texas A&M. It's at Georgia Tech. It's at Maryland. It's at Binghamton. It's at Vanderbilt. It's at U Chicago. It's
Because
not at
why?
Columbia.
Why?
Forget
People
about
still
the Jews,
they don't have
because
that reverence for the Ivy Leagues as we used to.
They don't. They just don't. Again, the biggest threat to the American Jewish community today is the American Jewish community today. It just is. We refuse to get out of our own way because we insist that the only places of success, the only metric points where I can be proud of my child is if they got into Columbia. They refuse to recognize that there are institutions that not only can achieve what Columbia and Harvard can achieve, but can actually surpass that in many ways. I cannot tell you, as I mentioned earlier, the amount of billionaires and hedge fund guys who said we don't want to hire these graduates from Harvard and Columbia. I have yet to hear a single hedge fund guy or billionaire or CEO tell me, yeah, that University of Austin, Georgia Tech, Binghamton, we're not so sure. We're not going to hire those guys. I've yet to hear that. It just doesn't exist. And by the way, I spoke at Binghamton over Sukkot, so a couple months back. Jewish life there, forget about there's kosher food and you can get out of your tests if it's on a holiday. It's flourishing. I mean, it's almost, I'm forgetting the word. You have so many options every day. And to send your kid to an institution where they have to fight back, what an insane proposition. We're just so much better than individuals who will tell you to your face that October 7th didn't happen. But if it did happen, it was a good thing. You want your kid to fight, who cares?
No.
You know, can I just say one last one? Just this morning on my way to work, a woman yelled at me, "I'm going to spit at you, Jew." I kept walking because literally, who cares? I mean, I don't even think she was wearing clothing. She's obviously demented. You know, wouldn't be surprised if she's a drug. Who cares? You want your kid to fight back? I mean, give me a break. No, you don't. You just want to brag at your shul's kiddush that your kid got into Columbia on a scholarship. Because again, I'm saying this now because I have nothing left to lose because I don't get invited to the fancy galas anymore. I know I'm not changing any parents' minds. All the parents on the Upper East Side are going to continue to send their kids to Columbia and all those places, but they should just be intellectually honest for once and admit they don't want their kid to go to Columbia to fight back. Okay, your kid probably doesn't even keep Shabbos. You want your kid to go to Columbia so you can say he went to Columbia and isn't he just so great? And yeah, it's probably true that Jews shouldn't go to Columbia in the future, but not my kid because he's so great.
Now listen, well, thank you. Okay. Shabbos, thank you. Rudy Rockman, I had this conversation with Rudy 2 years ago. He was in Columbia also. And he said, you only go to these schools if you're going to fight back. If you're not going to fight back, and most of our chevra, even within the Orthodox world, are not doing that. They're putting on a baseball hat, get the degree, ride the Ivy League wave, get the good job. And there are some law firms still that will only take, from certain schools. But you can still get into those schools if you went to YU or some other college.
Well, first of all, there are also lots of law firms. I think it was about 13 that wrote a public letter to Harvard and Columbia saying, unless you change your ways, we're not going to hire your graduates anymore. Again, I've yet to see that letter targeting Binghamton and Maryland because it doesn't exist because their students aren't, calling for an intifada. But I want to go back to another point. I went to Harvard not to sue them, shocking. I went to Harvard to actually study the Holocaust. That's my academic interest. I've been to Poland like 30 times. I'll actually be.
You studying the divinity school.
Yeah. Don't hold it against me. And Yad Vashem, which is Israel's Holocaust Memorial / Museum, it's actually very controversial amongst Haredim and even some modern Orthodox Jews. I would include myself in that. Why? Because when they talk about resistance and when they talk about fighting back, it's through one paradigm. And that is the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising. It's picking up a gun and killing a Nazi. That's considered resistance, and that's considered heroic. And a lot of Jews, again, myself included, say, well, that's important, and that's certainly one way of expressing resistance, but that's not all the ways. You could see Yehuda Halberstam, the Klausenberger Rebbe, who lost 11 of his kids in Auschwitz. He kept kosher for the entirety of his imprisonment. The Piasetzner Rebbe, Klaus Kalman Shapiro, he was writing Divrei Torah in a bunker underneath the Warsaw Ghetto. I mean, that's resistance. Yeah. I remember when Rabbi Haskell I didn't go to Ramaz, but I just remember this story. When Rabbi Haskell Luckstein brought in the students of Ramaz to talk about the shofar that was blown in one of the camps on Rosh Hashanah. That's fighting back. That's resistance. So the idea that the only way you fight back is by finding the most anti-Semitic college you can think of and going to all the protests and yelling yelling in their faces, "You're an anti-Semite." I mean, that is a very low barometer of fighting back. You know what fighting back and
Wow.
resistance looks like? It looks like marrying a Jew. It means raising a Jewish family. It means keeping Shabbat. It means putting on a Star of David necklace. It means, in spite of the insanity, you excelled academically. It means giving charity. That's resistance, and that's fighting back. And these grandiose ideas of the only way you fight back is by marching in the streets and yelling at the Palestinians that they're the baby killers. Look, if that's what does it for you, go for it. But it's such a minimalistic and
Wow.
such a arduous task to put on young Jews that it's their responsibility. Which, by the way, brings me to another point, which I don't know if you want to get into, but I'll say this: I spoke with Prime Minister Netanyahu when he was in D.C. This is about, I don't know, 3 months
Wait, but
ago.
before you continue with Netanyahu, I just want to congratulate you just for that's a beautiful speech that you just gave. It's just very, very near and dear to my heart. So I thank you for that. Continue with
Yeah,
Netanyahu.
and I'll also just say, because again, I'm so blessed to speak across the country. When people come up to me and they'll say, "Look, I'm not so religiously observant, but I've started lighting Shabbat candles, or I'm reciting a chapter of Psalms for a soldier or a hostage." I mean, that's remarkable, and that's a testament to the Jewish people. That's really fighting back. In terms of Netanyahu, I spoke to him whenever he was in D.C., and I told him, "You are not meeting with the Jewish leadership and the Jewish nonprofits and the Jewish establishment." I don't know, Mr. Prime Minister, if that's intentional or not. It was intentional. But I hope you can recognize by meeting with us, he met with a couple of Jewish students, that you see what very few American Jewish leaders see, which is young Jews, young American Jews, are not tomorrow's leaders. They are today's leaders. They are the ones who are filing lawsuits against their universities. They're testifying in front of Congress. They're appearing on national media. They are cultivating and creating the national conversation. You know, it so bothers me. One of my personal icks is when you have another combating anti-Semitism fellowship among the plethora of combating anti-Semitism fellowships, and they'll use the same tagline of "We are developing tomorrow's Jewish leaders." They're not tomorrow's. They are today. They are literally doing the work that you
Wow.
guys, the adults in the room, should have done decades and decades ago. Abraham Foxman, who was the former head of the Anti-Defamation League,
Sure.
the ADL, he posted on his Twitter. I'm on Twitter a lot, so that's where I get a lot of my info. He posted on Twitter, I don't know, maybe a month ago, something to the effect of, "I see what's happening on the campuses, UCLA and Harvard and Yale, and I'm just so disgusted. This cannot stand." And I wrote back and I said, very respectfully, "But you were the head of the Anti-Defamation League for a bunch of years. How do you let it get this bad?" You know, people often ask me, "Shabbos, how did it get so bad on campuses?" I say, "How the hell should I know? I'm 25 years old. I just got here. You tell me. You guys are the ones with all the money. You're the guys who've been profiting off of combating anti-Semitism for decades. You always like to brag about how you have access to the White House and to Congress. How did you get it? How did you let it get so bad? It's not our fault. It's your fault." And there has been zero recognition of the immense failures of the Jewish leadership. There has been zero acknowledgement that there needs to be some type of change. And instead, they continue to profit off of our faces. In fact, I'm in a WhatsApp group for Jewish students, by Jewish students. We created it shortly after October 7th. And one of the things they were talking about was just yesterday, Hill International was putting out a fundraising pitch. And two of the students in this WhatsApp group said, "My faces are being used in these brochures. I don't want Hill to use my image because they've actually hurt our cause on campuses." And so I said, "You should write to them, maybe publicize. I can connect you with their CEO, Adam Lehman, who's a good guy." But I think there's a lot to be answered for about how the Jewish leadership raised billions and billions and billions of dollars and not only have nothing to show for it, in many cases, they hurt our cause. And it bothers me to no end that young American Jews who are leading by and large, in an incomparable way, are still being treated as tomorrow's leaders. We'll get to you eventually. You have to give them the resources they need immediately.
No,
And the
you're
fact that they
you're
struggle to raise, $500 for a tabling event on campus is really inexcusable.
this always should have been grassroots. That's the bottom line. It's now grassroots. It's been top down. It's been. I mean, I can't even tell you how many. I don't have to tell you. You just gave a great speech about it. I've been saying this for years. We are pitifully funded in terms of Jewish education, which is the only real response to anti-Semitism. I've been saying this literally for decades, and to whatever degree can be fought, needs to be done by today's leaders. And kol kavod to you. Let me get back to that. You just settled your lawsuit with Harvard.
Yeah.
Tell us what's going on with that. Why did you settle? Maybe just tell everybody, summarize the case.
Sure. Well, I can't talk about the terms of the settlement. I signed
No,
a
that's
bunch of
okay.
stuff. But what I will say is this: from the very beginning, when we filed our lawsuit, this is last January, we were interested in structural reforms, and we were interested in making sure that no student, Jew, Christian, Muslim, Black, White, will be treated in the way that I was treated, and too many other Jewish students were treated. And Harvard should have taken our concerns without a lawsuit. We should not have had to have filed it. And they should have taken our concerns seriously even before the judge issued that our case would go to trial. And they should have taken these concerns seriously from day one. And it is a damning indictment on the state of higher education that in order to get the structural change that we were looking for, we had to go to a court of law and we had to file litigation against the university. And this is unfortunately not a unique story. There are dozens and dozens and dozens of similar cases brought by Jewish students across this country against their universities. So as I mentioned, our judge, Judge Richard Stearns of the Federal District Court of Massachusetts in July, issued a 25-page scathing ruling against Harvard, writing in part, quote, "The facts as pledged show Harvard failed its Jewish students. He tossed out Harvard's double motions to dismiss with prejudice, and we became the first case in American history pertaining to the civil rights violations of Jewish students on a campus to actually go to trial. It had never happened before. And our case has already been cited as legal precedent in a half dozen cases, UCLA, Yale, I believe Cooper Union, as legal precedent, Kestenbaum v. Harvard. And while on the one hand, as I said, it's a damning indictment that it's gone to this point, on the other hand, I don't know if the word is proud, but I'm grateful that we have charted a legal path forward so that no student would have their civil rights violated against them. In terms of the settlement itself, it's public record that I opposed the first settlement. I did not believe it went far enough. I did not believe that it had the structural changes we were looking for. And then President Trump was reelected. And what President Trump has been able to do and currently is doing is far more than our lawsuit can ever possibly achieve. I was with the Secretary of Education at the White House 2 days ago, and I spoke with her specifically about these issues. I think taxing the endowments, withholding federal funds, lawfully detaining and deporting the students, foreign students, are just tremendous. And I'm very grateful
So
to know.
you got all those things through the lawsuit. That's what the government is doing.
So there are two parts. There's the court of law, and then there's the court of public, well, I guess three parts: the court of law, the court of public opinion, and then the federal government. And because of our lawsuit, the federal government is now picking up the baton, carrying it forward, and they are creating political changes to ensure that Harvard is being held accountable. And I felt that this was the appropriate time to settle. And I'm very, very grateful.
And if Trump had not become president, would the things you were pushing for, you said you didn't accept the first offer of settlement, but you accepted the more recent one, I guess the final one, right?
Mhm.
That's, I mean, can you share what those things you can't?
Can't share. All I will say is what I was saying earlier, which is we're incredibly grateful that the Trump administration has led on this issue from day one. I'm a Democrat. I voted for Jamal Bowman, Bernie Sanders. I used to be
Bernie
a socialist.
Sanders, were you?
I know. Oh yeah, I've done teshuva. I've repented. But I decided to not only vote for President Trump, but to actively campaign for him. And we are seeing his promises made on the campaign becoming promises kept in the administration. And I feel that this lawsuit had come to a natural end, and we will continue to hold Harvard accountable with the power of the federal government.
And as a result of this fusion between your lawsuit and the federal government's, the changes they're making, the laws they're implementing, you feel it will be safer for students at Harvard now or in other Ivy League schools?
For sure. I mean, unquestionably, the fact of the matter is,
I just don't, I don't know what, and I respect you can't share, but because I don't know what those things are. So, but the result, you feel that it will be, Jewish students will be more protected as far as, right? I mean,
I'll say this: the actions of the federal government pertaining to the federal funds being frozen, pertaining to the lawful detainment of foreign students, pertaining to an endowment tax, pertaining to screening the students who are here on a foreign visa. All of those things, coupled with the strong case we made in the court of law, those things will ensure that, forget about just Jewish students, but as a culture, as an institution, Harvard will change, and we've already seen Columbia University, for example, already instituted some of the cultural changes and educational changes that students had been requesting and really demanding for 4 years. So I'm very confident because of the Trump administration
And
that
do
the
you think
Harvard
could it be undone if when Trump is no longer president? Are these
well, that's in theory, which is why it's critical that this big, beautiful bill, for example, is passed. It's critical that the United States Congress works with President Trump, Democrats and Republicans alike, to realize that this is not a conservative or liberal issue. This is not a Jewish student issue. This is an American issue that requires a comprehensive American response. So these things actually need to be codified. They need to be legalized. Look, the executive orders pertaining to, for example, foreign funding are really good and they're really strong. And what would be even better and even stronger would be an act of Congress. And that's why the Anti-Semitism Awareness Act, for example, that's why the Deterrent Act, for example, are great pieces of legislation. Unfortunately, like most good pieces of legislation, Chuck Schumer killed them. But we're hoping now with the Senate Republicans in charge, we will be able to see, at least to some extent, these pieces of legislation being passed.
wow, wow. And you recently moved to California, is that correct?
I moved to California a week ago, so just in time for the riots. I believe part of the city was on a curfew for 2 days. So as you can imagine, I do not like living here, but I work for PragerU, which I do like working for.
Wow.
So they are
Wow.
the only organization I think that I would ever move to California for.
Are you one of you said your background is more democratic, which is interesting. Are you sort of a rarity over there, PragerU?
um, I'll put it this way. We have core beliefs that we all believe in, and that trumps, no pun intended, that trumps any hypothetical potential political disagreements.
Right.
So I'm very happy and comfortable working here. And more than that, I believe in the cause that PragerU believes in as well. So championing American values, championing the state of Israel, championing Western hegemony, championing religion. These are all things that I'm very proud to be working for.
Do you think that Israel can stay a bipartisan issue? I mean, we've seen in the last few years it becoming more and more of a Republican. Do you think the Democratic Party can be brought? There are different factions. There's certainly different factions in the Republican Party. I'm not happy with everyone. The more isolationist view within the Republican Party that's, holding, I don't know if they're holding Trump back, but they're pushing him, not to release the bunker busters for Israel, which I think is a big issue. That has serious ramifications if Israel can finish this. Well, you know what? I just diverged, but if it's okay, I want to stay there for a minute. How would you deal with? This is very imminent right now. I got 2 kids sitting in Israel in bomb shelters, and my other son had to bring back because he's playing our spring retreat and doing all these gigs. He had to go to Sharm el Sheikh to get a flight out, and so we all have mishpacha, we all have family there. If Israel can't take out as much of their nukes as possible, what would you do about the Republicans that are like, I think they're pressuring Trump not to?
Sure. So I would say, first of all, the Republican isolationism, as it just pertains to quantity, is significantly fewer than, let's say, I wouldn't even call it isolationism on the Democratic Party. I mean, just in terms of metrics, in terms of numbers, it's just not a lot of people we're talking about here. I do think the Trump administration, the Trump administration has been consistently clear on the issue of a nuclear Iran. They've been consistently clear about peace through strength and America first. So President Trump will be the ultimate one and the only one to make a decision. And I think he will make a decision fairly quickly as it pertains to bunker busting material and B-2 bombers, for example. Having said that, President Trump, and the background to this is I was at the Ohel of the grave of Lubavitcher Rebbe for the 1-year anniversary of October 7th with President Trump. At the time, it was former President Trump. I was with Ben Shapiro, a family of Idan Alexander, an Auschwitz survivor, Jerry Warski. And I remember actually turning to Ben as we were waiting for Trump. He was like 4 hours late because he's late to lots of things. I remember asking him sort of this very question. And his answer, which has really illuminated my thinking, has been, look, Trump is philo-Semitic. I mean, he just is.
Right.
He talks about growing up. Some of the most formative moments of his childhood was his father, Fred Trump, closing these multi-million-dollar business deals of Manhattan real estate. and growing up at the feet of his father. And who is he closing these deals with? It was Orthodox Jews. There are pictures of Donald Trump in the 80s visiting the Bobover Yeshiva in Borough Park. He talks extensively about this affinity he has with the Jewish people. He's a pragmatist. He believes in strength. And the state of Israel has done in the last 2 years something that really no other country in the last 100 years, or I shouldn't say 100, at least since World War II, has been able to accomplish. And he likes that and he appreciates that. So because of his philo-Semitism, he actually keeps the anti-Semitism within the far right of the Republican Party at bay, because they know that there is no place for that type of ideology in the mainstream Republican Party. Having said that, the danger comes when Trump is no longer in office and Trump is no longer the overwhelming force that he is today. I mean, the Republican Party, let's call a spade, functionally doesn't exist. It's the party of President Trump. I'm not necessarily saying that's a bad thing, but the Republican Party knows that you toe the line. In 2028, you are going to see a plethora of candidates running for office, many of whom I would agree with you have this isolationist streak to them in varying forms or the other, and that I would be more concerned about. But the immediate, the B2s and the kids in Israel in bomb shelters, I'm not concerned about the Republican Party. I'm far more concerned about the Democratic Party, because, as I said, this is a party that wasn't even able to pass the Anti-Semitism Awareness Act, the Deterrent Act. They had a vice president by the name of Kamala Harris who said, Israel can't go into Rafah because I've studied the maps and there's no way to safely evacuate civilians. Meanwhile, Israel, within a week, safely evacuated 1.2 million Gazans from Rafah and then rescued Jewish hostages. So the immediate, I'm far more.
Do you think it can turn back? I mean, I don't want to make myself too old, but I had the zuchus. I consider zuchut. I worked for Patrick Moynihan, who was a senator from New York. He was a progressive liberal and the senator to defeat the bill in the United Nations of Zionism is racism. Yep. This is the late 70s. Okay. I worked for him in the late 80s when I was in college. And in those days, we were afraid of the Republicans and we loved the Democrats. I worked for Gary Ackerman. I don't know if you remember him. He was my congressman from Queens. And so, I've seen in my own little lifetime it shift from the Democratic Party to the Republican Party in terms of love and support for Israel. Do you think it could go back? Or do you think we could at least, refine it somehow?
First of all, you don't need to explain Senator Patrick Moynihan, because I ride the train station almost every other week, so I'm familiar.
He was a philo. What was it?
Philo-Semite.
He loved Jews. He used to go. David Lukens. I don't know if you know David Lukens. Worked for him for years. He used to have him at a Seder, and he used to study Torah. He was like one of these. Yeah.
Oh well, he has a great train station named after him. Certainly, look, American electoral politics is a pendulum, especially because it's binary, right? There are only two parties. So it certainly could change. Things in American politics are not infallible. Things move quite often. But I think politics is also the art of the possible. And we can theorize and hypothesize and speculate what this will look like in 5 years or 10 years down the line. But I think we also have to be realists and recognize, well, the immediate danger coming from Iran, the immediate danger coming from Lebanon, or to a much lesser extent, Yemen, that demands political allegiances. And I always say, I don't vote for parties. I don't vote for peoples. I vote for policies. And during the 2024 presidential election, there was only one candidate who had policies pertaining to American Jewry, pertaining to issues that we care about, who spoke my language, and that was President Trump. And so too in the 21st century, in June 19th of 2025, we should vote for policies. And as it happens to be, most of the policies that are favorable to our community are being advocated and advanced by the Republican Party. And whether that's sustainable, whether that's good in the long term, I don't know, probably not.
I just felt people can't hear that so much. I've tried to argue that, Trump is such a divisive, polarizing figure, and people are so disgusted by certain things. And I would say, I said exactly what you just said, which is that we're trying to not focus on the person or even the party, but look at what the individual says they're going to do.
Yeah, on a personal level, I mean, the amount of friends I have lost because of politics. Even just this morning, I posted a video with PragerU about Juneteenth. Today is June 19th, where the last slaves received their freedom. And I posted saying, celebrate American history. That's certainly important, but we should also recognize, there's no Black America, there's no white America. This is what President Obama alluded to in his 2004 Democratic National Convention speech. There's the United States of America, and we have only one Independence Day. That's July 4th, 1776, which I thought is a fair point. And, someone texted me who I haven't spoken to in years saying, why are you so evil all of a sudden? And not as like a joking way and like a very serious, what had happened to you. I remember giving a speech shortly before the election, and I don't think I even mentioned Trump. It was not a political speech, but it was, I had endorsed Trump weeks earlier, and a woman comes up to me shortly after my speech saying, how dare you? You want to bring about a second Holocaust, and the political climate, not just in the national electorate of the United States, but within the Jewish community, is so shockingly elementary and dangerous. I've been disinvited from speaking at synagogue.
But I guess, it's interesting. This is very autobiographical. I'm sorry to cut you off, Shabbos. You spoke at the Republican National Convention, and I was asked to do so in 2016 and to give the benediction. And I was about to do it. I felt very honored to have been asked. My friend Jason Greenblatt, who was Trump's bankruptcy lawyer, we grew up together, and he called me and he said, Mark, before you say yes, check with your board. My board was fine. And then my board said, but check with a couple of MGE participants. 2016. I called 3 random students of mine. Okay? They all said the same thing. What do you think they said? 2016.
No, don't do it.
Rabbi, if you spoke at the Republican National Convention where Trump is, I would lose complete respect for you, and I would never step foot in. I would never come to MG again. And I didn't do it. Now, part of me felt like I wussed out. And you want to hear something interesting? Rabbi Riskin, who should live and be well, was one of my rebbeim. And I'd seen him, and he said, Mark, you have to do it. Because Ivanka was converted by Orthodox rabbis. If all the Orthodox rabbis keep saying no, because father's such a divisive figure, then it's going to be a turnoff to her. And it's like but then, for 3.5 minutes in the limelight, I'm going to jeopardize young, less affiliated Jews tend to be left of center. And in 2016, I don't know what I would have done today, honestly, but I cannot afford as a rabbi to alienate the very Jews I'm trying to turn on to Yiddishkeit. Yeah. And you do that if you get behind a guy like, you and I have different jobs, I guess. So, but I just found that to be, and I said, well, what about the policies? Who cares about the person? People care about the people.
So at my speech at the Republican convention, which is not a long speech, I think it's like 4 minutes, I don't endorse Trump. In fact, I mentioned his name only once, and it's in passing to say I support President Trump's policies to, XYZ. And I was shocked at the level of outrage against me after that speech, because again, I didn't even endorse the guy. And then when I decided about 2 months later to in fact endorse him, then I knew, okay, there's like no turning back from this. So my speech, which is significantly longer, it's like 10, 15 minutes, I said at the Republican Jewish Coalition, I outlined in, I'd like to think, a very credible, logical, rational way, which you can disagree with, but at least I give arguments why I was supporting Trump. And that's when just the amount of friends I lost just escalated. And that's a shame. I'm not a victim. I'm not looking for pity. But what I will say is the hardest part for me in the last year and a half has been people who don't speak to me anymore because of politics. It's been the synagogues that have disinvited me because of politics. That's been, really, really difficult to navigate. And again, I'm not a victim. I'm not asking for pity, but I don't even know what I would have done differently because I still.
No, I don't think you can. You're holding on to your convictions. It's just, we were just talking about will Israel be a bipartisan issue? Only Republicans, being pro and not the Democrats. We don't want the Jewish community, our Jewish people, to be like, well, if you're Orthodox and you're this, you're that, you're gonna be into, and if you're not, you're not. That's what it's become to a large degree, and I don't like that divide. That divide is very unhealthy. For a Jewish outreach and education, we're all supposed to be connected to Hashem, and it shouldn't matter who you vote for.
Yeah, so I'll say this. I speak a lot on Shabbat to different synagogues, and this is a plug. If there are any rabbis listening, please invite me. I could use the cash. And I always get the speech right before my speech. If the rabbi pulls me into his office, quietly close the door and says, look, there are a lot of politics and people don't always agree. I just want you to be aware and please don't discuss politics. And I say, Rabbi, I get it. I won't mention it. No worries. And inevitably what happens, I never mention politics, of course, but during the Q&A, someone will always bring up,
Right.
Kamala Harris and the JDL and this, that. And I say, look, before I answer your question, which I will, I want us all to recognize that unity does not mean uniformity. Unity does not mean that we don't have differences. Unity recognizes we do have differences, but nevertheless, we are on the same team. We all want what's best for our community. We just disagree on how best to get to those goals.
Right.
And now I answer the question. And I always say with the caveat, it is always a shame that, and I always say this. I want you to disagree with me because that is not only healthy and good, that's vital for democracy. It's important that we disagree with each other. I want you to disagree. The problem is when someone's disagreements with another outweighs their ability to form relationships and to even listen to another opinion.
Well,
and as I said, the thing that hurts me the most is when synagogues will say, we can't have you anymore. Even though I'm not discussing politics, but just because you've endorsed someone in the past, we just can't do it. That to me is really, that is dangerous. That is unhealthy. And that, I believe, will be the American Jewish community's downfall, not being able to listen to people who disagree with us. So again, rabbis, please invite me. I won't mention politics, but if it comes up, we're adults. We can make rational decisions, and we can and should and must be able to disagree and disagree better with those in our community.
Well, you're invited to MJE. You just give us a date. We would love to host you. I would tell you to stay away from politics because on Shabbat I just want it to be a safe space for people's spiritual growth. But there's a very, very fine line these days, especially when it comes to Israel. Like Israel is a moral issue. Iran not getting nuclear capability is a moral issue because it comes down to self-defense, Jewish self-defense. And if rabbis are not going to stand up for Jewish self-defense, then who the heck is?
Yeah.
So, not to have someone like yourself is foolish. Whatever denomination anyone's listening to this, I have colleagues in the Reform conservative community. They should be having you left and right because you're standing up for Israel, and you'll make the case why affiliating yourself with the Trump, school, whatever it is, or PragerU, or whatever it is helping Israel, and somebody else will disagree. That's fine, as long as we're all trying to get to the same place. 100%. I just don't want to have a situation where people are going to stop coming because that's happened in some denominations where people just stop coming to shul because they were tired. They were sick and tired of hearing the rabbi, be political.
The danger with that, though, is I'll give you an example with Harvard Hillel. A former, actually, I think he's still a student there. An undergrad wrote an article before October 7th, this is about 3 years ago, saying that for the end of the year barbecue at Harvard Hillel, they had put up Israeli flags. And a staff member at the Hillel went up to him saying, you got to take the flags down because this is not a political event. So we have to also define what political can be, because unfortunately for a lot of Jews, unfortunately, Israel is a political issue.
Yeah, well, that's pretty sad. For me, and we're going to finish in a minute. I know you've given me a lot of time. I really appreciate it. But for me, and you can come to some of my classes on religious Zionism, or Soloveitchik's approach, the Rav Kook's approach. It's a spiritual. Israel's a spiritual place, and so is the IDF, as far as I'm concerned. But that's just me. Obviously, not everybody agrees. I want to end off on a positive note. Who do you think are some of the Jewish people's greatest allies today? And in the globe, in the world, that we should be strengthening our relationships with, or potentially could be our friends?
I love the question. Christians. I'm speaking at the Christians United for Israel Summit next week. I spoke there last year too. They're simply incredible. And there is this BS notion that they only care about us so that Jesus can bring about the rapture when we all move to Israel. First of all, they don't believe that. That's just not true. Right. And second of all, there's some evangelical groups that do, but it's not the majority at all. Right. And that's certainly not represented in Kufi.
Right.
They will tell you Genesis. They will tell you Genesis 12:3, those who bless Israel will be blessed. And they also recognize the fact that this is the Holy Land. This is where Jesus walked on water. This is where Abraham tried sacrificing Isaac. And this is the land that needs to be protected. And there's no nation on earth that takes that call more seriously than the Jewish people who've been fighting since its existence to protect that land. So the Christian community, bar none. Interestingly enough, I have found a lot of Hindus. Hindus truly believe in the Jewish cause. I think it's because they also, in a smaller, maybe micro sense, see themselves as in a similar position of Israel vis-a-vis Pakistan and having, a nuclear armed country threatening your existence. And I would say just on a broad level, we are perhaps naturally, perhaps justifiably hesitant when the stranger says we support and we want to help. But I would say beggars can't be choosers. And I think we have a lot more friends than we give ourselves credit for. There are a lot of people who want to help us, who love us. Yeah. And that actually brings me back to our questions in the beginning about college. Don't go to institutions where you're not wanted. Go to institutions where you will be valued, where your voice will be amplified, and you will be welcomed with open arms. That's way more important than fighting some roommate who draws swastikas.
Shabbos Kestenbaum, thank you so much. This was really enlightening. You're awesome. Hashem bless you with continued strength to keep fighting the good fight. I really believe in what you're doing and how you're doing it. And, part of me would love if you could somehow stay, neutral and not in the Trump camp in a sense, not because I dislike Trump. I very much agree with almost everything you said, but because I know that there's so many Jews that will not invite you to their shuls just because you endorsed him. That's sad, but at the end of the day, I think to affect change. See, I'm trying to affect change on the spiritual level, so I can't go there, but if you want to affect change on the material substance level in terms of policy, then you need to get behind the people in politics that you agree with.
Yeah.
And you need to be vocal about it. So I struggle with this a lot, and my mentors and teachers have always taught me, Mark, you're a rabbi, you got to know your place, you got to, Rav Soloveitchik was very, very makpid on that as well. To do that, and you'll burn a lot of bridges, and it's just not worth it. But I think you've burned some bridges, and I think you've done it brilliantly. You should
appreciate that.
You should be zocha to burn. Well, I'm just kidding about that.
Amen. Well, thank you very much. I really appreciate it, Rabbi.
And I meant that's a real invitation to MJ. It would be a zechus to have you.
Thank you. I'm looking forward to it. Take care,
man. Thank you so much for your time, and good luck at PragerU. Can I ask you something off thing where we'll cut this out? We're done.
Yep.
Is he okay, Prager?
He's better. So he's currently receiving some type of physical therapy, but my understanding he's out of the hospital. His mentality is one whereby he's going to come back and do all of the shows and everything will be like normal. I'm not going to say that isn't going to happen, but man plans and God laughs. Right. So we'll see. But thank God he's much better than where he was 6 months ago.
Yeah, I'm a huge fan. His son used to daven with us, and once in a while he would come and daven with us at MJ. Yeah, it was a big zechus. And whatever, I know his brother, I know his family for many years. When you come to New York next?
I'm not sure, but hopefully very often. I'm in, the Shidduch Parsha, so.
Oh, okay, cool.
Got to be in New York as much as I can, but I'll let you know in advance.
I should have asked. That would have been a good question.
Yeah, you could add it in the postscript. I am single, so if you have any, friends or granddaughters, let me know.
Oh yeah, 100%. My wife's heavily involved in that.
Okay, let's do it.
But let me know when you're in town, whatever it is, then you have a Shabbos. I'd love to bring you in for Shabbos morning. I think it would be a big zechus.
Oh, thank you. Okay,
yeah, we'd work something out because I know you're not only have to get married after earn a living also.
Yeah, gotta pay rent. All right, thank you again, Rabbi. I appreciate it. Amen.
Thank you.
Take care.